Now, those of you who don't know Bob, when he walks up on the stage, I want you to guess what type of business he's in just by what he's wearing. Come on up here, buddy. Thanks. Now, today, and today only, to celebrate not the Testicle Festival, but the National American Day of the Cowboy and our party for that on July 26th, everybody in here has been designated an honorary Bob Garamendi. And what that means to you, if you step up, is instead of paying $35 for the party, you get the Cowboy and Rancher price, Bob's price, of $25. Tickets are on sale out front. Thank you. Quick announcement. I don't know if you saw it in the paper, but the Angels Camp Business Association is hosting on this coming Monday, the 14th, at 5:30 at Greenhorn Creek. It's called the Large Format Retail, aka Big Box What's Ahead for Angels meeting. A really good topic. I think we all ought to get there if we can. It's good stuff. Moving forward, as far as the agenda goes today, do you all have your agendas there with you? We're about to hear from a phenomenal speaker by the name of Tim Johnson, who I will introduce momentarily. Following Tim's presentation, we'll be back in our breakout sessions. We're going to reconvene here at 3 p.m. And what will happen at that point is all of the moderators, it's amazing. Tell my wife that, will you? We're going to reconvene here at 4 p.m. And what will happen
is all leaders who would join me here on stage, and we're going to do an unwind and figure out what happened today. With that, let me tell you a little about our speaker, Tim Johnson. Tim is the owner of a business and website called California Businessman. His bio, if you want to read it in full, is in your folder. But one key thing that jumps out on me in this bio, has anybody ever had the privilege of driving through Yuba City, California? Yeah, I mean, who hasn't, right? I used to think Yuba City made Stockton look like Shangri-La. It's not that way. But one of Tim's accomplishments while working with Yuba City was he saw a transition from an unemployment rate of almost 20% down to 9%, which if you think about those numbers, that really speaks for itself. Prior to his getting there, Yuba City, I guess, I don't know if I'm saying this right, was it not ranked the worst place in America to live? Where is it now, by the way? No, but what is the worst place in America to live? Please don't say anywhere in our county or we'll get you out of it. Anyway, I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Tim Johnson.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank you very, very much for this invitation and this opportunity today. I want to congratulate all of you, particularly the Chamber of Commerce and to all the elected officials. This kind of turnout is overwhelming for a community of your size. I have been asked and requested for the better part of a year since the mortgage meltdown occurred to help communities up and down the state try to understand what their options are, and then as the unfortunate set of circumstances occurred with the speculation of the futures commodity associated with oil has changed the price at the pump, cities and communities like yours have looked like the proverbial deer in the headlights and are trying to figure out what the next steps are. So having done that over the last year, we put together a variety of presentations for communities. And Diane Gray asked me here today, and a longtime colleague of mine, Steve Art, joined me this morning, and I heard part of Steve's comments. Key to the issue was for Steve and I was to try to understand some background about your community. And we knew that we could talk about economic development. We didn't quite know what level of understanding or degree of level that you were at. We didn't know if this was a primer. We didn't know if this was Economic 101. We didn't know if this was advanced economics. So what we decided to do was try to give you a cursory level of understanding. And what I'm going to try to do today as I approach this is the entitlement of my speech is called Some Assembly Required. And the reason why it's called Some Assembly Required is because you've got work ahead of you. And I'm going to try to illustrate to you the foundations associated with economic growth versus economic development. And I try to talk to you about the prerequisites, the tools that are available for you, some of which are free and available to you. One of them happens to be standing in front of you right now. And then the third component that I'm going to leave with you is some opportunities. Now, I hope that there's an exit door out here because I don't want to insult anybody because I kind of took it from a 30,000-foot level, but I think you'll find it interesting. Having said that, again, I want to compliment all of you. I think you did a great job. And I can talk a long time about economic development, and it reminds me of a story to know how to remember to be brief and succinct. The story was about a young minister who just came out of the seminary. And it was very, very exciting. He got signed to a church in a rural community. And he was very, very excited about making a major impact on his congregation. So he worked and worked and worked for a Sunday sermon. So Sunday came around and he stepped up to the pulpit and he looked out and he only saw one person in the pews. Well, he was kind of baffled and kind of disheartened. He looked around and he recognized the individual that was sitting in the pew. It was the local rancher. He looked at the local rancher and he said, well, I've got this sermon and it talks about the teachings of the Bible and the importance of following it. Would you like to hear it? The rancher kind of scratched his beard and settled back in the pew and was totally undaunted about the whole experience. And he looked at the young minister and he said, you know, when I go out at night to feed my cattle and only one head shows up, I still feed it. Well, the young minister thought that was pretty insightful, so he went right on ahead. Half an hour, hour and a half, 2.5 hours he went on. And then with perspiration on his brow and out of breath and high anxiety, he looked out at the rancher. He said, well, what'd you think? And the rancher, totally undaunted by the whole experience, ruffled his beard, shuffled back in the pew and looked back up at the young minister and said, you know, when I go out at night to feed my cattle and one head shows up, I still feed it, just not necessarily the whole load. So remind me of that. I got about a half an hour to move you through this, and we're going to try to cut that down to some time so we can take some questions. So, if I could have the next slide, please. Again, as I'd identified for you, we're going to go through 3 components of this presentation. We're going to talk about prerequisites. We're going to go into step 2 under foundations and step 3 opportunities. Next slide, please. Well, who's the best and most famous economic developer in the world? It's Christopher Columbus. Why? He did not know where he was going, got there not knowing where he was, left not knowing where he had been, and did it all on a government grant. That's it. Next slide, please. Okay, let's get into the serious components of this. This is where you get lost. And as I had a chance this morning to get around and look at some of you in your different sessions, I can see immediately that there is an incredible amount of animation and spirit and thought-provoking direction here by all of you. And that's wonderful to see. But let's get this back into some academic fold for a minute so that you can put some meat on the proverbial bone. First of all, we're going to define economic development for you because it is confusing, because there is a difference. There's economic growth and there's economic development. In the context of economic development, we see it specifically as wealth, incomes, jobs, and investments. That's economic development. That's economic development. Don't forget that. Next slide, please. You can have economic growth and not economic development. Let me say that again. You can have economic growth, but not economic development. How do I know that? There's some 350,000 real estate foreclosures going on in the state as we speak right now. Our construction industry is tanking as well as our real estate industry, and it's because there was no economic development actions associated with what had been going on over the last 6 years in the state. That's economic growth, but there was no economic development associated with it at all. Next slide, please. Here's economic growth. There are 4 factors. You can have economic growth through the increase of population, infusion of capital, harvesting of natural resources, and changes in technology. Technology in a hospital that you have here in your backyard changes about every 18 to 24 months, if not quicker than that. There was a study done by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Department of Economics in 1978 by Dr. David Birch and Lester Thoreau. And they identified that if you do nothing in an economy, that you can lose anywhere between 5 to 7% of your economic base on an annual basis. Again, you can lose, if you do nothing, you can lose anywhere between 5 to 7% of your economic base on an annual basis. So if you get a population increase, if you get infusion of capital corresponding with that population increase, that's economic growth. But that doesn't mean you're doing anything with it. It doesn't mean that you're embracing it. It doesn't mean that you're directing it and improving and enhancing your tax base. It doesn't mean that it's paying for picking up the garbage or patching the potholes. But it is economic growth. Next slide. Now this is where the difference is in terms of economic development. Economic development can be defined as any action or actions that creates change in what and how goods and services are produced through shifts in resource allocation such as production, workforce skills, technology, information, finance capital that increases economic growth. There was a gentleman who created the free market system by the name of Adam Smith hundreds of years ago. He's rolling in his grave right now because he doesn't understand the speculators that are going on with the oil industry right now in our nation. And a lot of people don't understand it either. His concept of the invisible hand rules the marketplace. Unfortunately, at that period of time, they did not have commodity traders without rules, regulations, policies, and procedures that deal with strategic resources that we currently are confronted with. So in the context of economic development, if you feel as though you don't have a strategy, don't feel bad. The federal government doesn't have an economic strategy either. And we're all the, unfortunately, victims of it. But while this sounds academic, break it down. Let's look at it just for a second. We're creating a change in what and how goods and services are produced. Now, part of the discussion I've heard today in each one of the breakout sessions is, well, we're not necessarily certain we want to bring in new business and industry. How about growing existing business and industry? Yeah, that's a good point. It's well taken. But how do you use economic development? What tools do we need to bring to bear to help diversify and sustain the county and the cities here in the area? And in doing so, what is the means of production of doing that? What kind of resource tools do we need to bring to bear? Do we have the workforce to support it? I heard one individual talking about this morning is, we're not so certain we even understand what the workforce skill set is of the people of this county. So how can we express it to business and industry that wants to grow and expand here, that are not only here currently, but may want to come here? It's a good point, well taken, and something that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And the other element is dealing with the finance and capital component of economic growth. You can have economic growth. I can move my business here tomorrow. I can bring all my money with me, or I can leave it in Sacramento where I'm based. That's called intermediation. Do you have intermediation moving in your market? I don't think you do. I've checked, I've looked, I've sat with the Federal Reserve and looked at the dollar numbers coming in and out of here. You did extremely well through 2001 to 2006. In fact, you outperformed the nation, and in some cases, the majority of the counties in this state from a percentage basis, not from an aggregate level. But since 2007, you've gone the opposite direction. So we have to reevaluate what it's going to take to drive intermediation back into the county in order to help you bolster economic development. Let's go on to the next slide. There are two components as it relates to prerequisites. And the first one, and this is economist coming out of me, is that the first one deals with supply side, right? There's two sides of the curve. There's the supply side curve and there's the demand side curve. However, the supply side curve can also be known as the broader view. And let me explain. While what you're reading up there says covers any investment or actions that improves the environment for business or economic activity, what it is simply saying this is, make sure that you have streets of gold. Pave those streets, get the infrastructure in, get the street lights up, make sure that you've got the best schools, K through 12 education that you can possibly have. If you don't, you will suffer in the future. There is more that has been written about this, and if communities don't embrace the supply side component of economic development, you will fail. And the rationale behind this is this. It is an investment into your community. Because as the next component describes, the demand side, or the narrower side, it simply says direct assistance to business and industry to reduce cost or risk, encouraging investment and productivity. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, what this is the incentivization of business and industry to do business in your backyard. I'm going to tell you right now, after some 30 years of economic development and also in the city manager's office in Sacramento and San Diego, I've told all of my city council members this and all my county board of supervisors. This is a personal issue, so maybe I have to run out the exit door here. You never, ever spend general fund money to incentivize any business. Don't do it. Because you don't know whether that business is going to be merged, acquired, or closed. I'm sorry. It's happened repeatedly. A company called RV Holdings pulled a quick one on the state of Oregon recently. They were in Riverside County, employed 500 people. They went to Riverside County Board of Supervisors and said, we want money, otherwise we're packing up our 500 jobs and moving to Roseburg, Oregon. The county said, we're not going to be blackmailed by that, see you later. I think that was an excellent move, because what wound up happening was, during this period of time, the price of gas jumped twice what it had been. And of course, you all know what's going on with the RV industry. They got the state of Oregon to make them a 0% interest loan on a new building and gave them all sorts of incentives that, unfortunately, I can't tell at this particular point whether somebody has absconded with the money and left or gone where, but they have never materialized in Roseburg, Oregon. But yet Roseburg, Oregon, its county supervisors, its city council, and the state of Oregon are out millions of dollars. Promise me you will never spend general fund money on incentivizing a business, be it already here or one that you want to recruit. It's not worth it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the two prerequisites that you have to deal with in the context of economic development. Next slide. Now, I'm asked you to look real closely at those, but hey, take Tim Johnson at his word. We just met today. You're the ones that are going to have to make this decision. So you're going to have to balance the scale between the county board of supervisors, city council, and the private sector leadership that you have here today. You folks are going to have the heart-to-heart conversation of what you want to do. I don't think that you're in that bad a shape that you have to go out on a limb to give any money to anybody to do anything. This is a wonderful place to do business, and I think if you just all in unified direction, tell people that'll be enough to get you to where you want to go. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about foundations, and I'm going to talk to you about tools. The first one is called a situation analysis. Now you've had an EDC in Calaveras County before. I know that you have. It's years ago. Maybe some of you don't remember it or haven't looked back to see the history and trends associated with it, but you have. And you've had a strategy. I ask you to go back and dig up that information and use that as a base, as your database, and work from that particular point and continue to build upon that into what is called a situation analysis. This is basically, for those of you in the private sector, is a marketing mix of your community. It looks at the price, product, promotion, and overall merchandise and distribution of the products, services that you have in this community. In concert with it, the vitality index of city and county governments, school districts, so on and so forth, that serve this area. When you compile that, and I will give an outline to the chamber so that they can give and they can distribute it to all of you electronically. You can then use that as a template to gather this information. It'll take more time than probably money, but it's a good start. And then invite myself, Steve Art, and maybe Julia Burrows from Roseville or anybody else in the economic development field. We'll come back and act as objective reviewers of this information and try to give you further insight relative to your strengths and weaknesses that you're examining today. But it is an excellent tool to use, and it is a base analysis from which we work on an economic development. The next component is a SWOT analysis. That's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. And that's what I'm hoping that you are going to do today. I had talked with Diane at length today, and I'm hoping that we'll come out of these sessions, and I don't mean to misdirect you today and maybe what your plan is. But Steve, what I'm hoping is what will happen today is this. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, you all reconvene here. And the moderators of each one of the breakout sessions comes up here and gives you a quick overview of what's done. But what I hope that they have done is allow everybody to illustrate what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are of Calaveras County. And then everybody's given a series of stickers, and you come up here and you prioritize what the top 3 strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are in Calaveras County. What that will allow you to do, and then allow me to help you later on as a volunteer, is to start to vet or filter the directions of interest that you have to achieve economic development in this community. Because without that, we have no consensus. Am I correct? Somebody nod their head out there that you all haven't fallen asleep because it was a great lunch, that you're actually still attached to this. Okay. So having said that, that's what I'm hoping that you do today. Because I don't think there's going to be any chance in a cold day in August around here that you're all going to get back in this room again. So I'm hoping that that will happen. The next component is what we call a cluster analysis. And a cluster analysis, and then I guess you could say I'm a workaholic, I've kind of already looked at this for you. And this is a metric, an analytic tool that we use that compares the output of specific industry segments against state and national rankings. And quite frankly, through 2001, 2006, you guys were on top of the world, whether you know that. I'll show you that in a few minutes. A shift share analysis is similar, but it deals with employment issues. And it's used to examine a mix of activities and whether these activities, in particular your area, which you're now witnessing, have shifted away from your economy or coming back towards your economy. And that's real important, and some of that work has already been done for you. Those are the tools of the trade of economic development. It is not rocket science. However, if I had put, Steve had talked about he passed geometry. He didn't pass algebra or calculus, and if I put the formulas necessary to calculate a shift share or a cluster analysis on here, I'm sure that all of your eyes would glaze over and I'd lose you at this particular point in time. Hence, I didn't do that. There are mathematical formulas that we do use, and yeah, it can look like rocket science, but that's why you work with guys like me to make sure that you can do it and get it done. The formulas are free. You could Google them up. You could Google the formula for calculating a shift share for Calaveras County. In fact, I'll be honest with you, it's already been completed by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, U.S. Department of Labor. It's already done for you. So for the elected officials in this room, don't worry too much about any cost, because most of what we can describe for you here has already been done and completed for you. Next slide, please. What I'm hoping what yields out today for you, and what I hope that comes from every organization that I've worked with over the last year in California, is that from a program like this, what should occur is a mission, goals, and objectives. And hence the reason why I'm really pushing you towards a SWOT analysis and getting that going, because you need to keep this process moving forward. From that, and not until you get to that point, should you even begin to embark on a structure and a budget. I mean, it's just a waste of time. Because unless you can come to some kind of consensus on a mission, goals, and objective, there's no reason to talk about organization, structure, and budget. Vision is the same way. Again, get to the mission, goals, and objectives. Vision will come later, and it'll be fun to do. Visioning is a great opportunity for communities. And then subsequently implementation. As I was introduced, the issue associated with reversing the economic conditions of Yuba and Sutter counties. When I got there, the organization was bankrupt. It had a $54,000 IRS lien against it. The former executive director was up on federal charges of sexual harassment by 3 women in the office. And they said, welcome to your new job. And oh, by the way, we have 20% unemployment rate. We have 25% of our economy living under the poverty levels of California, and they're talking about closing the largest employer north of Sacramento to the Oregon State line, Beale Air Force Base. So I had less than 90 days to work with people like yourself in those 2 counties in order to organize those following elements that you see up on the screen. And I believe it was the only 2 counties in the state to this date that by advisory vote voted for an economic development strategy. If you can do that here, I highly recommend it because it brings all of you together into a buy-in. Again, an advisory vote only, and do it when there's an existing election. Don't have a special election for it. Okay, let's go in and have some fun. Let's go talk about Calaveras County. The next slide, please. I think, again, you are a wonderful community, a beautiful community, and we're going to talk a little bit about 3 or 4 segments of opportunities that exist. Next slide, please. Before we get to that, I want to tell you this. The reason why you are so great is because you're in a state that's great. And I know that at this particular point, there seems to be a variety of media headlines that describe otherwise. Let me share this with you. Media has to sell media. And they don't sell headlines if they're telling you everything's great and wonderful, do you? They'll lull you into a state of Never Never Land, so they like to shake us up and scare us with headlines that the sky is falling. Let's go through a couple of these for a minute. First of all, California, if it were its own nation, is the 8th largest economy in the world. California comprises 13% of the gross domestic product of the nation. 12.5% of the nation's population lives in California. 10% of all housing stock in the nation is in California. California adds anywhere between 400,000 to 600,000 people a year, creating a population of the current size of the state of Oregon in 6 years. That's the reason why the state is so hard to manage. I like Mr. Schwarzenegger. I think he's a very charming individual. I also like Mr. Davis. I thought he was a very nice individual too. But I think it is extremely difficult for all political elected officials in the state, and I tip my hat to all of them, because I think it is a tremendous undertaking and responsibility. Contrary to opinion, California is not the most expensive state to do business. That title goes to Hawaii. Contrary to public opinion, California is not the highest tax state in the nation. That title goes to Rhode Island. California is ranked #1 in the nation in aerospace based on employees and dollars spent in production. California is the #1 high-tech job, has the #1 position in high-tech jobs in the nation in computer design and related services, telecommunications, service employment, and semiconductor manufacturing. There are over 1 million people working in the high-tech industry alone in this state. Biomedical companies in the state generated over $62 billion last year in revenue, accounting for 2/3 of the market of NASDAQ-listed life sciences companies. California has the largest healthcare employment sector in the nation with over 1.4 million people working in it. There are more Asian, Pacific, Black, Hispanic, and women-owned businesses in California than any other state. California is one of the 10 states that has outproduced the nation average in job growth, average wages, total personal income, per capita income, and population between 2000 and 2007, more than New York and Texas. California possesses 25% of the Forbes 400 richest people in the nation, larger than any other state. California possesses 15% of the Fortune 500 firms in the nation, second only to New York. And California was ranked the best place to live in the nation by Harris Poll. That's why Calaveras County is a great place to live. Next slide, please. I took a 30,000-foot look at your economy as an economist, and identified 3 categories that I thought you could enhance and explore further. And obviously you're doing that through the day's breakout sessions. Tourism is significant in the context of your area and the categories that you have there, and in ecological, heritage, cultural, agricultural, and recreational components are very significant. And I think that one of the things that you miss on this is the fact that between 2001 to 2006, employment grew by 15% in the tourism industry in this county. You outpaced every county by percentage in the state of California in employment growth in tourism. How many of you in this room knew that? Did you? Okay, good. Congratulations, by the way, for all of that work. What is significant to me in terms of doing this is that you are now car-centric. And as the price of gas continues to go, and if it goes to $8 a gallon, what will you do? How will you get the Tim Johnsons out of the valley to come up here and spend money in your community? It's going to be very difficult. Maybe I come up for once in a year, and that's it, and that's all that you see me. A key concern that I have that you don't do in this community is you're not packaging tourism yet. You're not packaging tourism. There are a variety of great assets that you have, but you need to tell the Tim Johnsons of the world and other parts of the state that there's more than one thing to do up here, and that's jumping frogs. There are a variety of great assets. There's the Sierra Nevada Logging Museum. There's the Big Tree Program. There's just the beauty and quaintness and charm and character of this area that should just be looked at and adored. There's a variety of, obviously, performing arts programs. What you need to do is you need to hit us in the head. You need to package on your website and on programs and handouts what you have on any given weekend. Have any of you been to Cannon Beach, Oregon? Okay. There's a community of 3,000. On any given summer day, it explodes to 31,000 based on tourists. But they've taken advantage of the universities, and particularly Portland State University, and created the Haystack Production Theater. And they've had it there for some 50 years. Now I got to ask you a question. In a great community like this, which has great history, why don't you have the Twain Dialogues here? Why don't you, for the rest of us in the state, to understand the importance and significance of heritage tourism, have an understanding of the history of this area, in concert with all the other great activities, from golfing to river rafting to fishing to looking at the beauty of the scenery in this area on any given week? Package this place, will you? Next slide. Agriculture is very important, but all across the nation it is questionable about its growth. I disagree. Where agriculture is seeing its growth is in value-added products, and you, more than any county I've seen, have embraced it. You just haven't enhanced it and elevated it to... Let me give you an example. You have blueberries that have grown in this area. 10 years ago,
California wasn't even in the top 3 producers of blueberries in the nation. You guys were part of that. Now, when you crush top it, turn it into jam, you liquefy it, you dry it, whatever you do, it's a value-added product. Why aren't you doing it? It all has to do with enhancing employment and tax base. Get on it.
Wine. Now you're talking my subject. This is lovely up here. Again, it's part of the packaging of everything that you have to do. And you heard Steve earlier talk about it. He wants to come up and visit those vineyards. I do too. It's a great way to get to know your community, and it brings people up here for just another reason. The other one that I happen to like, and I've worked a great amount of deal with this one because it was because of the area that I worked in Yuba Sutter recently, was the growth of the olive oil industry in this state. While we import 95% of all olive oil in the United States, 90% of all olive oil in the United States, that's produced in the United States, comes from California. And you're part of that. And you've got to figure out some kind of branding and some kind of marketing structure in order to... There are some 400 of you in this state, and you need to get together and create coalitions that be able to... And
the Bel Airs and the rest, and get California products in there instead. So that's another key element that I hope that you would look at. Next one, please. Okay, I haven't been sued yet by Intel, but I've taken advantage of their logo and changed it for the purposes of here today. I was at part of the presentation today on emerging technologies in manufacturing industry, and I was very taken and excited about some of the things that were talked about there today. A couple things I want to share with you, that there are opportunities that exist, and I recognize that there are a variety of entrepreneurs that move here. They are moving here because of the quaint and charmness of your community. The question is how you incorporate them into the fabric of your community and help create new job opportunities, employment opportunities, and tax base. Now, again, there are tools to do that, and they're available for free to do so. But here are a couple opportunities that exist here. One of the things I was very shocked and surprised about is the lack of Web 2.0 activity that's used on any of your websites, either at any of the government agency websites or any of the nonprofit association websites in this area. Let me give you an example. There was no indication whatsoever of any kind of survey activity, a question that you may have to prompt people to participate in the activities relative to what's going on here in Calaveras County. There's no blogs, there's no independent testimonies, there's no key issues relative to the widgetizing of your websites into this area. Get social media into Calaveras County and start promoting it. That's an easy, free thing to do, and it also creates a tremendous amount of business. And while we're talking about that, give you an idea, over in El Dorado County, and on the software component, since we're sitting in a high school, they have a program over there that just got bought by CBS. It's called Max Preps, P-R-E-P-S. And it looks at all the nation's high school athletes and ranks them for college recruiters. Huge multi-million-dollar corporation that was started in El Dorado County and recently bought by CBS. They're still in business over there. They never asked for a penny of incentive from anybody in El Dorado County, but they're growing by leaps and bounds. And that's the same kind of business that could come here because it's looking for a quaint and charming location. Professional services, your growth is going on there. In a share analysis that I did for you, for example, in information services, in a 5-year period, it grew by 10% in this county. Exceeded by percentage 48 out of the 58 counties of California. In terms of professional and technical services, it grew by 12%. But yet we're not talking about these. And this is a direction that our economy nationally is growing. And in healthcare, you grew by 15%. And as I told you earlier, technology changes every 18 to 24 months. So things are going to be changing at your hospital. Next slide, please. These are the challenges that I've enumerated for you that I think you're going to have to look at. And if you're hurting currently, if you think, particularly elected officials, if you think you're hurting economically, it's because the economic tools that I've looked at don't lie. And in part, one of the reasons is that you received economic growth, but you didn't do economic development between 2001 and 2006. And so what's transpired here is, and whether all of you knew this or not, in a real estate segment of your economy, from an employment perspective, from 2001 to 2006, you grew by 40%. You're now on a tailspin out of that segment to, I don't know how far it will go. And that also corresponded with the construction industry. Again, it was economic growth, not economic development. So what do you have to work on? And one of the challenges that I think that you're looking at is how to retain the character of your community.
And one of the things that I want to offer to you today is I have been asked by a variety of communities in this state, one in particular that is similar in nature, the city of Mount Shasta, is to look at an economic-based strategy predicated upon quaint and charming. Can you create an economy that is sustainable and diverse, that does not ruin the character of being quaint and charming? Well, I'm going to offer to you today that if you care to participate in that pilot project, we'll include you in that and help you achieve that end result for free. We'll let you make that decision later today, and you can tell us next week. The other issue that I have and concern, and if you don't participate in it, then you're going to have to answer these questions on your own, is how you create a sustainable economy. That's a key question, and I'm not sure how you're going to do that yet without seeing the situational analysis and some of the information that you come out with today. The next component is resource allocation. Again, you heard my comments earlier about budgetary issues as it relates to economic development strategies. There's a whole host of programs that are available. The index is enormous, and it's something that we can talk about, but should be addressed as soon as you get your mission and goals and objectives completed. And the last challenge that I think that you have, and like so many other communities, and that is maintaining the leadership and momentum. And I don't care what anybody says, it has to be a public-private partnership. It doesn't mean that you all have to be in favor of the exact same objective and program. It just means that you're moving the economy forward through economic development activities. Now, how you reach that consensus, well, that's anybody's guess at this point, but you need to make sure that the momentum continues. Last slide, please. I want to leave you with 10 points of economic wisdom. Know thyself. Examine the unexamined. This is a real good day to be doing that, but don't stop doing it. Prepare for what you don't see. And all of you are asking where the end of the price of gas goes, don't you now? But I bet 6 months ago you didn't think it would be where it is today, did you? When I was in Yuba Sutter, given the fact that it was in something less than a 100-year floodplain, every day of my life I was looking at what it was going to take to evacuate that community and rebuild it if in case it flooded again, a third time in less than 20 years. You know, I went down and helped in 2007 as a volunteer with the U.S. Department of Commerce and the International Economic Development Council, deploying grants and loans to business and industry impacted by both hurricanes, Rita and Katrina. They could see that coming, and they knew it was going to come, and they went through the inevitable. But prior to the evacuation of the folks in Rita and Katrina, which was the largest evacuation in our nation's history, prior to that, the largest evacuation in our nation's history was the 1986 evacuation of the people of Yuba Sutter for the 86 flood. And I'll tell you what, folks, similarly to what New Orleans is going through, that is exactly the same case of what happened to Yuba Sutter, and hence the unfortunate reason why it was named not once but twice the worst place to live in America by Money Magazine and Rand McNally. Not one of your better public relation efforts. Everything that you do should be specific, measurable, accountable, responsive, and time-bound. Let me say that again. Everything that you do should be specific, measurable, accountable, responsive, and time-bound. Why? You do not want to go sideways with a city or county elected official. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Make sure that they have the very best information on all economic development activity that's going on here. I don't care whether you don't like them or not, at least respect them enough to make sure that you give them that information. Everything that you do should be open and shared and participatory. Everything. And I say that to any of the city staffers that are here. Don't get sideways. Keep it open. And I don't care what a business and industry says that they want to keep it confidential. If they can hire a site location consultant who's come from the ABC Corporation and they are interested in building a 300,000 square foot building, then you figure out from there who's in the marketplace that's interested in building a 300,000 square foot building. But Don't worry about corporate officials telling you that they want to keep it confidential. That's not in your game plan and shouldn't be. It's a good way to be on the unemployment line, I'll tell you that much. The next thing that you should be doing is assuring that customer service is the order of the day. That you should have a stable and operating budget when you decide to begin to implement. Make sure that everything you do is innovative. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but make sure that it's innovative, particularly for the county. Enjoy the fact that you have the opportunity now to base a vision. In Yuba Sutter, what was so humorous about it was within a 6-year period of time, we created a vision. It was a 2-part vision. Here it was. That within 3 to 5 years, we would become known as the best rural economic development program in California, and within 5 to 7 years, we would become the best rural economic development program in the nation. In 2001 and 2002, Forbes magazine named us twice the best location in rural California to do business. And in 2006, the reason why I'm no longer at Yuba Sutter is because we achieved our vision, not our mission. We received a National Award of Excellence from the U.S. Department of Commerce as the best rural economic development program in the nation. That's what I want to hear from you folks. That's exactly what I want to hear from you. So when you heard Steve Art say this morning that your plan is only good from about 3 to 5 years, in 5 years from now, I want you folks, I want you to be this third community in the state of California to receive the National Award of Excellence for having the best economic development program in the country. By the way, just so that you know who you're talking about, was in the city manager's office in San Diego. San Diego was the first city to receive that award. And then I was in Yuba Sutter, and it's the second city in California to receive that award. And I would be most honored to hear that I helped you understand the opportunity that presents itself by you becoming the third city in California to win that national award. Last but not least, celebrate your successes. Celebrate your successes. There have been so many communities that have failed to do that. Seattle, with Boeing, lost corporate headquarters from Seattle to Chicago. That was something to be sad about. But they just lost the corporate headquarters. They didn't lose but maybe 50 to 100 people. All of the aerospace jobs are still there. So they went out, and Boeing was going to look for a new location to build the 777. So it was a national, international competition. Seattle won that competition. Tremendous amount of work put in there by the mayors and surrounding communities and the county supervisors. Nobody celebrated that fact, but yet tens of thousands of volunteer hours were put into it. When we in Yuba Sutter acquired the Northrop Grumman's unmanned autonomous vehicle, the Global Hawk, and its corresponding manufacturing base and corresponding 1,100 jobs and 325 subsequent subcontractors that would come into Yuba Sutter and are still coming into this very day. We celebrated for a week. The total cost of that celebration, which was supported by sponsors, was in excess of $500,000. Do it. It is the way to mobilize and build in the stakeholders of the future development. And last but not least, don't forget to implement. Implement. Again, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate your attentiveness today. I went probably too long, but I hope that it was worth the time and effort spent. With that, I thank you, and if there are any questions, I'm available.
We've got time for probably 2 questions if you'd like to ask them.
Well, what do you think the effects of AB42 are going to do to economic development?
I don't think they're going to have much of anything, because all economic development is local, and you can get around AB32. That is the greenhouse effect and the reduction in carbon on the economy. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, thanks. There are marketing concepts that are used by, and I know that you're familiar with this, San Francisco and San Diego, which are some of your biggest tourism markets in the state. And when you see their commercials, you notice that they do guerrilla marketing. They tell you about SeaWorld. They tell you about the zoo. They tell you about the wild animal park. They'll tell you about their street fairs that they're having. They'll tell you about going to Coronado. They'll tell you about going to San Jacinto Mountains. They'll tell you about everything and anything that you were afraid to ask of. They'll tell you when the Padres are playing versus when the Chargers are playing. They'll tell you when the hydroplane races are in town. What they do is constantly alert you to when specific activities are going on, so it is easy for me, the tourist, when I'm potentially looking at when I'm going to one of those sites, what is going on at a specific point in time so that I can package everything. I can say, okay, I know that my wife and I want to go to these key events here, but hey, I can get out on Torrey Pines and play around the golf while she's on the beach at Coronado, and then I can reconnoiter with her later on to go to some street affair or event or shopping that she wants to drag me around to. That's what I'm talking about packaging. And you need to do that because you're a smaller community here, you've got great assets, but you need to hit the customer right in the forehead with it. Don't let them think that there is only one event and one event only and that's it. With the price, if the price of gas goes to $8 a gallon, how am I getting here? Well, I'm not getting on ExpressJet because they just went out of business and I don't think they can land up there at the airport off of Kennedy Drive. So how do I get here? Bus? Car? Rickshaw? So the point being is that you really need to think these together. Personally, this is a lovely community. And I think more and more people will come up here, but you've got to be able to package it such that you give them an economy of scale for bang for their buck. Again, thank you very much, and I'll be around available later on for questions.
That was wonderful. I'd like to thank you. And I kind of realized, Tim, that you are a three-headed beast. You're 1/3 Socrates, because I think that's who you quoted on the top one. You're a third Alan Greens fan, and you're a third drill instructor. Anyway, we're going to break and go back into our breakout sessions. And remember, we'll be meeting back here at 4 p.m. Thanks.
All right, let's go. Yeah, I hold I'm headed to. Like he was about to fall down. Someplace else this morning. That's where I'm headed now.
Are you going back?
Yeah.
Good. Emergency. You're not on the center.
Is that good?
Morning,
Hi, we have met before. Yes, I recognize D2 thing or. Sorry.